This episode of Third Degree the podcast arrives with some significant audio problems. But remember, it was free. So enjoy. Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan, and welcome to another edition of Third Degree, the podcast. Hello, I'm Peter, and joining me is the near comatose and may soon have to go to the hospital, Dan Crook. Dan, are you okay, little buddy?
I'll survive.
What you got? You got a little of the Chicago flu?
Exactly that, yeah. I blame them a lot. I blame drinking things from the Brimstone Cup. I blame Chicago as a whole.
Yeah. If you drink out of the Brimstone Cup, you might have an STD. Or at the very least, herpes simplex type 2. One of the, yeah.
I did clean it pretty thoroughly, though.
Yeah, well, some things you cannot clean. And also founder and editor of ThirdDegree.net and from the Dallas Morning News, your hero and mine, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzzard.
Hello, Peter, calling in today from the Addison Oktoberfest right outside Dan's apartment.
Man, Dan, you must live in the most happening area because the noise outside either that or the apartment building you live in is poorly constructed because it sounds like you were actually at the Addison Oktoberfest hanging out there.
I mean, it's like 30 yards from my window.
Goodness, you are such a party animal.
Right in the heart of it.
Right in the heart of it. As soon as we're done recording, you're going to go out there and just go get some turkey legs and a big pint of beer and a funnel cake, aren't you?
No, I'm going to sleep.
Because you're sick. Aww.
Yeah.
All right, we'll hear more about Dan's adventures to Chicago here in a second. Speaking of which, I don't really know where to start, guys, because since the last episode of the pod, lots has happened. With the Huntsmen. The club has gone on a quick turn, back-to-back trip of road games, first in Chicago, where they got pummeled 4-0, and then earned a point last night, Wednesday night, in Seattle with a pair of donuts, which, Buzz, 1 point out of 6, I guess is good. Are we supposed to feel good about that?
Well, you can certainly feel good about the Seattle game, but you should not feel good about the Chicago game. That was the Chicago game was about as big as a defensive meltdown as we've seen in a long time, with lots of miscommunication. With lots of miscommunication across the back line, with the back line not just being out of sorts, but being out of shape too. Like guys losing their lines and losing their consistency. And then on top of that, Reggie looked like he shouldn't be playing. I think he was burnt out from the national team in the games he played. And the biggest takeaway, I think, from that game is Dallas did a really horrible job just limiting opportunities. They allowed Chicago to have 7 shots on target out of 17, which is a pretty high percentage rate. That's not very good. And so the Chicago game was a meltdown, and we should probably not even worry about it too much because they rebounded really quickly and held Seattle to just 3 shots on target. So defensive improvement was there, and the Seattle game was a good point.
But I do think it is worth going back and discussing the Chicago game for a few reasons. One, knowing the importance and value of playing a team like Chicago, even if it's on the road, seemed like a really good opportunity to grab valuable points. That would be discussion number one. And the fact that they turned up and crapped the bed, right, instead of getting any points. And then point two would be a conversation about Lucci's decisions about a starting 11 for Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't really know, without having been in the locker room, obviously, it's hard to really know what the mentality was because it felt like that may have been a game where Dallas looked at the schedule and thought, oh, here's a chance for us to get points. We're better than this team. And we know of late that that's not the way Dallas has played. Dallas has gotten results when they've outworked the other team and out-efforted the other team, all triggered by Andresik's move to the lineup several weeks back. So to go out there and play that flat was alarming. And in particular, Reggie, as I mentioned before, coming out the national team camp, did not look like he was ready for that game at all. And that set the tone early. And even just as you mentioned, the lineup choices, missing Brian Acosta, which is a big miss, don't get me wrong. as much as I'm on the bandwagon for Edwin Cerrillo's future, he's not there yet. He's not Acosta, and they are missing his passing out to the wings and his calmness and his game controlling experience. And so they start, the 18-year-old Cerrillo, and then in front of him, they bench the linking player. They bench Brandon Cervania. Lucci does. So now they're playing with two free eights, a 6-8 10 or 6-10-10, whatever you want to call that, not what they've been using lately. And they missed the connection. So Rio didn't have the outlets that he needed, particularly in a guy like him who's not a long passer. He needed guys to come check to him, and that didn't happen. And that midfield was a disastrous trio, and Lucci instantly recognized that it was a problem and changed it at halftime and brought Brandon Cervania back in. And that the second half in Chicago was much, much better, of course, but they're already down 4-0, so you're not going to get back into it. But it was a complete head-scratcher in terms of the lineup. And again, we've talked many times how there were going to be some mistakes this year from Lucci, and that Chicago game was a mistake. I mean, he even said something afterwards about it was a huge learning chance for him and his staff because they clearly blew it. And I don't think anyone will try and claim that they didn't blow it with that lineup and the tactics and everything they did in Chicago.
Yeah, based on the number of times Lucci has followed up a game in his press conference with something about learning, it's been certainly an encyclopedia worth of reading this season for him and his staff. Dan, you actually were on the scene. You flew to Chicago as part of the Brimstone Cup presentation. As a fan of the good guys, quote unquote, that must have been kind of painful to watch.
Yeah, definitely going to wear the scars of that one for a while. It was weird. It was an effortless performance. They gave up. And you're in a group of people that's travelled a few hundred miles to go and watch that, and to see that, it's just awful. And this was, I suppose, coming into last weekend, you probably thought, okay, a point or three on the road in Chicago is totally feasible. Getting blown out by Seattle is totally feasible. Okay, the end result is, if you expected a point from 2 games, you got a point from 2 games. But like you said, like Buzz said, the Dallas crapped the bed almost as much as Jesse crapped himself on the field.
Did he literally crap himself?
There's pictures going around. He crapped himself.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know this. That's alarming. No wonder why he didn't play well. That would be
It's a great way to time waste, though.
Yeah, we should talk about Jesse's new time-wasting tactic of the missing contact. That was genius in Seattle, by the way.
Yeah.
So in the middle of, at some point, now here, I have to confess, I have never seen the Chicago game. I was at a Catholic wedding on Saturday when the game was being played, and at some point in the wedding, I looked down and decided to look at my phone because it was a Catholic wedding, and saw the 4-0 halftime scoreline and thought, probably best that I'm at a Catholic wedding. And the one note that I saw in our little chat group from Dan was something to the effect that Schweinsteiger actually outraced Baji in a flat sprint.
It was a quote unquote flat sprint. They were both central, a ball straight out wide, and Baji was a lot slower off the mark.
And I know Buzz has a video of Schweinsteiger outracing Andresic, which doesn't surprise me in the least, but it's still pretty funny to watch. So maybe not the fastest team on the field in Chicago.
Well, we know that Andresic's not fast. That's not part of his game. And we can talk about how that impacted the Seattle game for sure in a minute. But, when you play in a team that has a center striker that isn't fast, which is fine, not everybody's fast, you can play a guy like Schweinsteiger as your center back because as a result, a guy that can control the pace and dictate things back there, and that worked for them. It's like, Andresic has a lot of great qualities to his game that we like. His pace is not one of them. No big deal, It just happened in this case. He had a 2-yard head start on Sebastian and got caught. So that was a bad moment. But that's not why they lost the game. The game was lost by the defensive meltdown. And I watched it a day later myself. And I guess going in, knowing the 4-0 scoreline, I was able to handle it a little more than I might have been steaming if I'd been watching it live. But it was not a good affair by any means.
There's
Before
also just nothing going forward. I mean, I'm over on the Chicago side for the last 5 minutes to do the trophy presentation, and I think I saw the ball cross the halfway line once. At one point, Mascara was about 30 yards away from me, directly behind the goal. That's not a there was just nothing in the attack. There was nothing. I think FC Dallas worked the ball into the box away from crosses twice, and even then it was like just a touch inside and back out.
But I want to get back to the question that I kind of raised at the beginning of this. And again, not seeing the game myself, I'm kind of going by things that I read and reviews of the game, comments on social media, etc. I think the thing that really bothers me about it, even more so than Lucci's kind of rookie coach starting lineup decisions, was the fact that this team actually showed up and, by all accounts, really just didn't have head right with ball. And it seems like that's a really stupid time to show up in the season, not prepared to fight for 3 points.
Yeah, it was an oddity to that. I think maybe guys that came back from national team camps were still thinking about their national team camps. And a mistake happens 5 minutes into the game, and you're down 1-0, and maybe it's just a night where you're like, oh boy, here we go. And this team is known to when they go down big. I mean, they don't go down 1-0 scrapping. When they go down, they've lost by large margins. So there's a cascading effect that happens, and when you got 4 or 5 guys on the field that are below the age of 20, maybe it's hard for them to grind it this late in the season. I'm not really sure. This is the youngest roster in the league, so you would think, as we had talked about, you would think you would have gone in recognizing this was a chance to get some points in a playoff crunch time, and it sure did not look like it in that game. And then again, 4 days later, it did look like it. So it's almost impossible to know without being in there more than we were why that mentality happened. I'm looking forward to talking to Lucci about it. Early next week probably. If he'll go back that far in time by the time I talk to him. So it's a mystery, honestly, at this point. We'll just have to hope that we get more of what we saw in Seattle going forward.
Dan, you were at the venue. Chicago's obviously a big storyline because earlier in the day, the announcement came that the sale from the owner had been transferred to a new owner. We all know the story that they're moving back to Soldier Field next year, and I've got 1,000 questions about that. I'm just kind of interested. I think you've told me you've been to Bridgeview before. What's your perspective of what that whole scene is like? How does it differ from Toyota Stadium in Frisco? And is it as bad as everybody says it is?
It's worse.
Wait, hold on. When you say it's worse than what? Worse than Frisco? Worse than everybody says it is? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, people that complain about Frisco, I think are really just clutching at straws. It's like a 20-minute drive from Dallas on the tollway, nice and easy. There's plenty of stuff in and around Frisco. It's kind of, as a population base, it's got all of Collin County around it. Bridgeview is way out by Midway Airport. It's an hour in traffic. It's got nothing in it. Since the last time I went, which was 4 years ago, they've actually built a few things up around the stadium. Before it was just wasteland. Now they've got a hotel, they've got some new stores and bars. But, it'd be like FC Dallas building a stadium in Melissa or Van Alstyne or somewhere like that. One of those real middle of nowhere, going to take you forever, nothing to do before and after the game kind of places. Potentially moving to Chicago, it really is a lifeline. They just have to actually market the team, because when I was there was definitely no traces of the Chicago Fire or any Chicago soccer other than the Red Stars in NWSL.
Yeah, I'm very conflicted about this news. Again, and I have to reserve my opinion on it because I don't really know much about Chicago, and I certainly don't know anything about Bridgeview, and I tend to think that a lot of this is more about marketing and branding than locations of stadiums. But um, I had this weird feeling that moving back into a giant 70,000 seat stadium for a team that struggled to get 12,000 people to show up week in and week out isn't necessarily a recipe for success, but maybe they know something I don't.
Well, for me, I'm trying to read it as an outsider. One of the things that had occurred to me was that there was a lot of talk of a USL or some other kind of team coming into Chicago with some of the other complexes that we're looking at getting built in the more immediate area. So it's possible, I think, part of this is an idea of protecting your market and protecting your brand of being, oh no, we're the Chicago team. Nobody else needs to come in here. This is our market. So maybe that's kind of why you go back to the big stadium. I mean, I get it too here. I mean, I don't want to be in Frisco. I want to play downtown, but I'm realistic about why it's where it is, and I know why it's not going to be downtown. But in the case of Chicago, apparently they got a guy who's willing to throw the money down and move it back. So I agree that Soldier Field is not ideal, but maybe his long-term plan is to get something in an urban environment closer to Chicago or in Chicago that would more fit the bill. Maybe he wants to take on one of these new complexes that people have been banning about these USL team ideas with.
Yeah, I am confused by that, but with the other part of it that I'm wondering, I think about the Dallas situation, and then if suddenly somebody said, "Oh my gosh, FC Dallas is going to start playing their games in the Cotton Bowl," I'm 99% sure that the attendance numbers wouldn't be dramatically different than they are today. Mostly because of the product. Like if you don't change anything about the product and just stick it in a different place, you're not necessarily going to get more people just because you think the area around it is more popular or younger or anything like that. And for me, that's always been the argument about what's holding this club back. Isn't in this club, meaning Dallas, has very, very little to do with location and everything to do with the actual product itself, and that it's just not very popular in this marketplace because there's lots of options for people's entertainment dollars. And that's why I'm a little confused about what's going on in Chicago. Again, I'll admit that I don't know much about it, but the thing that I wonder is if they go to Soldier Field and they end up getting, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, even hell, if they get 20,000 people inside of a 70,000 seat stadium, that's going to look like crap. And I don't know what they've succeeded at.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I did like, from a neutral perspective, I did like that their new owner, within a couple of days after it was announced he was taking over, said something along the lines of, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote, that if you want to have a good product, you have to pay market price for that product. So, and he was talking about players. So I think he must feel like he's going to do something LAFC or Atlanta or Inter Miami like. It sort of is the vibe I'm getting now, a willingness to spend there. So maybe that will work in terms of we're back, we're coming to town or something like that kind of mentality and dropping some cash. It's definitely sounds like it's not the Hunt FC Dallas model. And I agree with you that if you moved it to Cotton Bowl, the attendance would be the same. This club doesn't draw not because of where it is. We've talked about that a million times. I would rather play in the Cotton Bowl just because I like the Cotton Bowl better, but that's not the same as it solving any problems.
I think really there's just a completely different challenge in those two markets. If Dallas moves to the Cotton Bowl, or if it did move, the attendance will be roughly the same, but you're probably going to have a different attendance. You're going to have more people in Dallas. You're going to have less people coming from Denton County, from Collin County. Tarrant County, I'd honestly probably say the same. The problem Chicago Fire has is they're in Bridgeview. Well, their fans are actually from Chicago. Everyone's making that crappy drive. If they move it to Chicago, it may not go up a whole bunch, and I'd hope if they do, that move would be a temporary solution, but it would kind of encourage the fans they've lost to come back, especially if there's a new attitude, and particularly with, you know, there were help men out banners at every Chicago Fire game. It was just you know, it was something that really you couldn't compare to like the relationship with Hunts. So I'm not sure how much of that would be kind of applicable to the situation FC Dallas is in.
Well, it'll be fun to watch, and well, maybe not fun. It'll be interesting to as a study to see what happens with the Chicago Fire next year. I'm still unclear if they're going to rebrand the team. I kind of got the sense from that statement the new owner made the other day that they're leaning in the direction of not doing it, and I would be relieved to hear that. So. Fascinating stuff. All right, so we then turn our directions to last night. Last night being Wednesday, we're recording this on Thursday. Dallas goes to its House of Horrors, a place it hasn't won since, 2010, I think, which is CenturyLink Field in Seattle with the Sounders, and they grind out a 0-0 draw. And at halftime, I was watching this game. Now, again, I didn't watch the Chicago game, but Steve Davis, who he and Mark were doing the TV play-by-play, very well, by the way, I might add, tweeted something out saying, man, that is so much better. Wow, this is such a big improvement over the Chicago game. And I thought to myself, man, I didn't see the Chicago game, but that first half wasn't very good. And if it's that much better, that must have been some real crap in Chicago.
Well, it was about what was better was number one, the defensive cohesiveness. Thank you. In the sense that everyone was on the same page and playing as a collective. They put Brisson in for Reggie, so that, not a shot at Reggie, but it's a defensive first mentality out of that player. And they went with a 4-5-1, which is a bunker and counter, and they put the big surprise was Andresic going to the bench. And Barros being up top, but there was a lot more effort and a lot more willingness and a lot more work rate, and that all was positive. Peter, you got what you asked for, which was Paxton Pommelko on the wing. He didn't start on the left, but at 30 minutes he switched to the left. That's something we had talked about as a hypothetical, and I proposed it this week that I thought that's what they should do. And Lucci, obviously reading my tweets, decided that I'm a genius and you're a genius, and put Paxton back on the wing and brought on Cervania as the linking player and gave you basically the lineup you've been calling for 2 weeks. So you got to be pretty excited about that, I imagine.
Actually, after watching it, I was pretty disappointed. I didn't think it functioned very well, and I don't like Paxton out on the wing. I feel like your best player on the ball is suddenly isolated, and that probably I only probably feel this way because Jesus Ferreira was so poor. I mean, that was one of the worst performances in that position I have seen from a Dallas player in some time, and I was frankly shocked that Lucci didn't make the tactical decision to switch the two within about the first 15, 20 minutes of the start of the game, because it was very clear from the opening moments that Jesus just was not feeling it. And by all accounts, he was just as bad, if not worse, a few days prior in Chicago. And so all of these ideas of letting Jesus kind of continue his strong form in the center of the field and let Paxton do his thing out on the wing just kind of didn't seem very smart or anything after all, because I just felt like both players were just out of position.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was Jesus Ferreira's worst game in a while, although the Chicago game was also equally bad. So let's just say 2 games in a while, which is a shame because the previous 3 or 4 games he had been so effective being that extra player, making those slashing runs into the box between the center backs, and that was a big part of what Dallas had been doing so well. And that vanished in this game. I mean, he was terrible in possession and didn't do any linking or line breaking. Brandon Cervania was trying to do all that, and Acosta was trying to do all that, and that part looked good. But when you're playing a 4-5-1, what is essentially what it was, when you get forward into your 4-3-3 aspect as you move forward, you got to still have that component. And he did not provide it at all, and it was. I'm not sure what Dan thought about it, but I thought I agree with you, Peter. That it was Jesus' worst performance in some time, and now we have a big problem, or Lucci has a big problem. What do you do with both Paxton and Jesus? Can you play both of them at the same time? And it looks like the answer may be no, and that's not good.
Well, doesn't this really come down to the problem that the team just doesn't have a number 9 that they really want and feel like can be effective in different types of game scenarios? And Jesus obviously got to a point where they felt like he isn't living up to the hype. And so now they're rolling out Andresic, who had a okay run of form against some really poor teams, and then had a really crappy game against an okay team. And then it was probably decided that he didn't have any pace to his game, so they can't use him in a game where they want to bunker and counter. So, if Jesus has to sit, I guess he needs to, but it's pretty. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being hard headed here, but it seems pretty clear to me that Paxton needs to be back where he's been really running things very well for this club all season long, and it just seems mysterious to me that they just don't do that.
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know what you do in this scenario. You're going to have to go with the guy you think gives you the best opportunity to win. Obviously, that's a silly thing to say, but the way Ferreira's played the way Ferreira's played the last two games, I think right now the answer is going to have to be Pomacall. I mean, I don't think you look at these two road performances and think, oh yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to bring that back home. Maybe it's a case where Jesus really is so much better at home than on the road. Possibly that's a consideration, but it's pretty clear you got to stick with the 6-8-10 or not pure 10, free 8, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, that combination, you got to have that linking guy Servania in there, and you got to have Acosta in there. So it's like one or two of those guys is going to go. And this is something we've been talking about over the course of the whole season is in the long run, what are you going to do with Jesus Ferreira? We don't know where to play him. I mean, as long as Paxton's in town, I think we all agree that Paxton's the guy, in the middle where we like him. But, Lucci has a problem at left wing. He has a problem at 9, and he has a problem when he has two guys that play kind of similar spots. He's got to figure all those things out over this stretch run and try to get his team in the playoffs. He can deal with a lot of that over the winter, and this team's going to change over the winter. I promise you that. But I don't have an answer for Lucci either, other than I think Paxton has earned the right to be the guy. And then you got to figure out what to do with Jesus outside of that.
All right, put a pin in your promise that this team is going to look very different after the winter, because I want to hear what that promise is comprised
Okay.
of. Two, yes, Lucci has all sorts of problems with this team, but one of the things that he does not have a problem with is Paxton Pomacall. He is the star and most productive player this team has had all season, and yet for some bizarre reason he's kind of somewhat disappeared from the team over the last 4 weeks, it feels like. And I know some of it has to do with injury and some of it has to do with call-up, and I just want to remind everybody the nice little run this club went on came against some of the worst teams in this league at home. And it's not like Jesus has thrown out a really blinding performance in the midfield against a better side to date that I can recall. So it's kind of like the Andresic thing. It's, he did well against Cincinnati and whatever other crappy team they played recently. But it didn't surprise me that he struggled against a quality side like Seattle. And I just don't understand why Lucci doesn't make what to me is a very clear decision to put his best player back in his best position. I'm mystified by why he's not doing that.
Well, it only has been a couple of games that he did that.
How many games? But he had a crappy performance in Chicago. He sat Reggie. Why wouldn't you sit Jesse? Jesus.
Well, probably because Jesus was a big part of what had been successful for the last 4 or 5 games. I mean, there's a reason why Paxton wasn't playing. It's not just coincidental. It's like over the previous games before that, Dallas was playing really poorly, and Paxton was part of that. Paxton played really poorly. He was struggling with the hamstrings, and then they shut him down and pulled him out, and Jesus went in there and played great. So it's like you don't just bench Jesus just because Paxton's back. Paxton was sitting for a reason. So it's, now that you've had 2 bad games with Jesus, I don't think there's any question why he won't go back to Pomacall. I think that seems obvious, but I think it's slightly disingenuous to say that it was just for no reason that Paxton wasn't playing.
No, I didn't say no reason. I said some of it had to do with injury and some of it had to do with call-up. But if Paxton is healthy, and by all accounts he is, because he got time he went to the national team camp and he got a little bit of time playing with them, I don't know why you don't insert him back in his best spot. He's your best player. Jesus is passable in that position. He's not Paxton Pomacall. And if you want to go with you got to ride with the horse that brought you over the last few games. Okay, you did that in Chicago. You crapped the bed. Put your best player back in his best position. That's my feeling. So when people want to know what my reaction was to the starting lineup in Seattle, I'm not too excited about it because you didn't put your best player in his position and you kind of got the result you deserved.
Come on, we sat on this podcast for 2 weeks and you ranted about Paxton playing left wing. Why isn't he playing left wing? Why is he playing left wing?
No,
and so Lucci put him at left wing, and now you're mad.
No, you are totally misconstruing my point. My point about Paxton at the left wing was if you feel like you have to keep Jesus at the 10 position, for reasons I'm not really sure why you would do this, I guess the solve is to kick Baji off the field and put Pax on the left. That was my suggestion. It was not my suggestion that on the heels of your worst performance in years that you don't put your best player back at his best position. So a week ago when we made this, or the week ago and 2 weeks ago when I made the claim that maybe the solution is to get Paxton on the field, just stick him wherever you can because you got other guys that are playing well. Well, that's not the same thing that came up last night because Jesus, I don't think deserved to keep that spot after his performance in Chicago, based on what I read, because, again, I didn't see it. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I just don't know that. Jesus wasn't great in Chicago, but he wasn't the reason they lost that game in Chicago. The defensive meltdowns was the problem. I don't think Jesus was the problem.
Okay.
So it's not surprising to me that the reaction wasn't yank Jesus because he wasn't the problem.
Okay, so then so you get 20, 30 minutes, or even halftime in the game against Seattle. You're struggling to make anything go forward on the field. You're essentially just holding on for dear life, hoping Seattle or Diaz Arce doesn't do something magical. You've seen that Jesus has turned the ball over without pressure, unforced errors. I don't know. I think I counted 5 of them in the first 45 minutes. Why don't you make the switch then?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, I get why he didn't go into the game, but in the course of the game, I don't know why. That one, I don't, again, sometimes coaches make mistakes. Sometimes they read the game differently than we do. I can't argue that one. I was talking about subbing out Jesus early in the second half myself. So I would agree that that should have been a change that was made, but it wasn't. So, hopefully there's a reaction now. Hopefully the reaction coming back this weekend is to put Paxton back where he belongs.
Yeah, let me just be clear. And I'm not a soccer coach. I hold no soccer coaching license. I'm just a fan like everybody else. But it seems pretty easy to me to say your best player on the best team should be playing in his best position when he's healthy and ready to go. And last night in particular seemed like a really good opportunity for that. So, and hopefully Sunday when they play NYCFC, who, by the way, are equal with LAFC with the best road record in the league, with a road record of 6-4-4. Lucci gets that right, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, if you lose this one, you're out.
Well, I mean, if you lose this one because you decided not to play Paxton Pomykal at his best position, then I wonder if you should even be coach of this team.
Well, you want to talk about Paxton's form before he sat a couple of games, and then even his form against Seattle, it wasn't that great. So I mean, you put him back where he belongs. I agree, you should. I don't necessarily know that that's going to be it either. It's like he has not been great the last month. To be fair, Paxton.
No, but in that stretch of run, I don't know if the team overall had been all that great. They were still struggling with trying to figure out who was going to play the 9 position. They've got that weird black hole of nothing going on at left wing. But what I do want to point out from the Seattle game last night that I thought was really good was Acosta and Cervania. Another great performance. And I got to give Brian Acosta some credit. I was really concerned about him taking that 6th position. But, man, he has been dogged. He's chased balls down. He's put out a ton of effort. He's winning balls. His shooting has fallen off at a very frightening rate, but the quality of his shots at least. But his overall game, I think, has been pretty good, asking him to play a position that's probably not his natural position. And again, I still think Cervania has probably been this team's best player over the last, 2.5, 3 months.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think Acosta, in particular, his long passing out of midfield, out to the wings, out to Barrios, out to Baji Mascara, whoever you're going to have on the other side, was a big part of what was missing in Chicago when he was out. And as I've said before, I love Edwin Surreal, but right now it's not even close. I mean, Acosta's experience in the international game, his ability to control the pace, he did a fantastic job. And without him in there, Dallas was unable to link forward, and without Cervania as well, of course. But both those guys back is a big part of the connectivity, a big part of the glue. Oscar loved that word, the glue guys, the guys that bring the back and the front together. And Acosta really has done a phenomenal job in that as the single six, and he's been much more stay at home than we thought. And Cervania's become this fantastic box to box player. The passing chart and the defensive chart for him against Seattle, he literally covered the whole dang field. It was amazing to look at. He's matured into a player that we all had hoped he could beat. And when you pair that with whoever you're going to use in the free 8 spot, the 10 spot, whatever you want to call it, those two guys have got to be in there, which was part of what's creating our Paxton Pomykal, Jesus Ferreira dilemma, is that Cervania is so good and Acosta is so good, they've become indispensable in that midfield. That's actually pretty exciting, the fact that this midfield could be really good over the next 2-3 seasons playing together.
Yeah, I fully believe that if we go back and look at a game-by-game basis, where the team started to fall apart was when they didn't have all of their pieces in that center three midfield. I'm trying to think of the last time Acosta, Cervania, and Paxton played together in the center three and they didn't win the game or at least get a result or play well. Maybe I should just leave it at that. Like you walked away and went, well, that's not the problem with the team. We just didn't finish our chances or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't look that up ahead of time, but I would agree with that assessment. I mean, there was a time when they were going with double six, and that didn't work. And as soon as they went with the single six and more of the 6-8-10 combo, that's when it all clicked. And both those guys have been fantastic. And really the whole back six now, in effect, is all on point, other than Reggie's, whatever was going on with him in Chicago.
Yeah.
That's all. It's the front that's the problem. And it's been, other than Barros, it's the left and the front and the 9. It's just,
So, Buzz, you were surprised last night by the omission of Andresic in the top spot, and I guess I'm assuming what Lucci was going for was the classic versus Kansas City sit back and bunker and let Michael Barrios do his junkyard dog thing.
Oh, yeah, that was clearly a 4-5-1 with Barrios, the tenacious, dogged, hard-working player up top, just annoying the tar out of center backs, clutching, grabbing, getting around him, nipping with the ball, sprinting past him, because it is so hard to keep up with him. He's perfect for that role, and Lucci compressed it because that was a big thing that was missing in Chicago is neither one of the wings checked back and defended like you're supposed to in a 4-5-1. And Chicago overloaded the wings and was getting doubles on the outside and getting these balls in the middle. It was a horrible shape. So this time they just went straight bunker 4-5-1 and counterattacked. And Barrios was perfect for that. Baji vanished out of the game, and you could hardly tell he was playing, except that he kept falling down all the time. Don't get me started. So, I'm okay on turf in Seattle, a team that's in second place in the West. I'm okay with a bunker, and that's a formation they've done before on the road, where they've given up the Lucci ball possession and gone with this kind of counter activity. And we know that Andresic is not capable of an over-the-top counterattack kind of style. It's not his game. He gets in the box and he works guys and he hits them a little bit and he bangs and he scraps. It's a totally different kind of play. So the surprise was the fact that we weren't getting any chatter or vibe that they were going to go with this 4-5-1 bunker mentality. So that was like, we heard and we chatted about Paxton being on the wing. We chatted about would Reggie be out. Not in a million years did we talk about Andresic sitting and going with a counter. I mean, we should have, perhaps in hindsight, but nobody did. So that was a surprise, and I'm sure it was a surprise to Andresic. And for all we know, actually, the guy could be hurt or something. You strain your back on the plane. I mean, you don't know. He's already up there. So, I mean, I assume it's tactical. We'll find out when he gets back here, but given what the tactics they employed, it's not at all surprising that he didn't play. It was only surprising coming in that nobody thought of that, like that he was going to be the guy that was going to get sat because he played so well, frankly.
And the other thing that I had this realization was, and I had to go back and look at the rosters of which, did something happen to Edwin Jossi? He wasn't in either. He wasn't. Did he not travel with the team? Has he disappeared? Have they? There was that whole weird screw up with the league roster omitting him, and then the club no, he's still with the team and he was at practice. Is he still around or is he hurt?
Yeah, no, he's here. He's healthy. It's just coach's decision. He's just not in the 18. They usually travel an extra guy, and I don't happen to know right now who the extra guy is. So it's possible that it's him, but we didn't see him hanging around or anything. So it won't surprise me based on what I've witnessed in training that he's not in the 18 ever again this season. It's he looked the best I had ever seen him about a week and a half ago when I saw him in training, and it still wasn't good enough that I'm like, oh yeah, get him into the team. No, it still was like, no, dude, it's not good enough. So I don't think he'll ever play for this team again. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't. I know everybody's sensitive and doesn't want to be overly critical, but that is an extremely alarming result considering all of the noise the club and specifically the president and co-owner of the club made leading up to July that there was going to be significant improvements and additions, and what we ended up getting was a guy with only 1 foot and ended up being so bad you stopped using him after about 30 minutes. That's a pretty alarming transfer window.
Yeah, it's a bad miss on him.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the result in Seattle 0-0, that is a point. I kind of felt going into this 2-game stretch that Dallas would only get 1 point, but it just was the reverse results. I thought Dallas would grab a 2-2 draw in Chicago and then go get blasted by Seattle. So the other part that I think actually, as much as the Chicago result is not good to look at, I'm not 100% convinced that it actually works out better to have got a positive, good-feeling, grinding type of result out of Seattle as you go into this very important game against NYCFC, who, again, as I mentioned, are coming into this game essentially the same, tied for the lead in the league with the best road record in Major League Soccer. They and, of course, LAFC. So New York City's played 2 less road games. Their record is 6-4-4. And LAFC's road record is 8-3-5. So essentially 1.7 points per game for LA and 1.6 for NYCFC. The Pigeons, the best nickname in the league, by the way. And it's also, and we haven't talked about this yet, Buzz, it's the return of the Frisco Kid. Keaton Parks, who's really turned it on of late for New York City, makes his return to his hometown, and that's going to be fun to watch on Sunday.
Yeah, he's an interesting kid. I have not seen him a whole lot in person, only with the national team, because where he was playing in Europe, I hardly got to see him, and I don't watch NYCFC games. I'm going to go with Loons, by the way, is the best nickname in the league. Parks is an interesting question because FC Dallas knew about him here. It's not like they weren't interested in him, but he had loyalty coming up to his youth academy coach, and he chose to stay with his youth academy that he came up with. It's not even a DA team. It's just a whatever it is they do these days now. It's not DA, Classic League or whatever it is. He didn't join anybody. He didn't join Solar. Didn't join Dallas Texans. He stayed with his coach that he grew up with, and then went over to Europe and came up through some of the reserve teams and young teams. After he turned 18. So he's a guy that's done it a different way that doesn't happen very often. And I've been reading some of the articles about him, and he seems like he's a good glue kind of guy, that New York is better with him in there, and he plays a sort of linking-ish role, moving the team forwards and backwards, and probably a lot like Brandon Cervania, actually. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing him play in person. I really hope he plays. He doesn't play every game, but hopefully they're going to stick with him because he's been good lately. And for me, that'll be the most exciting thing about their team specifically, because otherwise the opponent is like whatever. But I'm looking forward to seeing him play. The Frisco Kid, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I read somewhere the other day that internally his nickname is Big Bird because he's just this very tall, skinny, blonde-haired kid. If you ever got to watch footage of him when he was playing for Benfica's B team, it was always pretty entertaining because it was always it was a B team, so it was a single camera, top of the stand shot, and
right.
You would immediately pick him out because he was the only blonde-haired player on the field more times than not. He's silky smooth. He's really good on the ball. I think Dominic Trent's trying to get him to play more of a 6 role lately, and it's not his strength. Was a couple of the articles that I've been reading about him lately. But man, if he doesn't start on Sunday, that'll be a disappointment. Because I'm sure he's got a whole busload of family and friends that would love to see him play in his hometown, the Frisco kid, Keaton Park. So if you go to the game on Sunday, that's absolutely one to look for because he's a local kid, and we should be proud of him too, for sure. NYCFC does lead the Eastern Conference with a pretty strong, as good as LAFC has been this year. New York City's not a too distant second. They're 57 points. They're averaging almost 2 points a game. They've only lost one game at home all season long. And while they have that advantage of playing on that ridiculously stupid postage stamp inside of a baseball stadium, they've been very good on the road. Their best league record indicating that. So it's Dallas has got their work cut out for this weekend, and this is a game they really must win. And it's not a must win, but 3 points feels like wow, it's pretty urgent.
No, you pretty much got to win this one. And unfortunately, New York City is out of their last 7 games, there's 6 wins, 1 tie, and no losses. So this is a hot team. But you only have 3 games left, Dallas does, and they really need the full 6 points from their home games, and then maybe get a little something out of Colorado Road too if they're going to have a chance to get in. If you don't win this game, I think you're toast.
I was actually just looking up their record against the Western Conference teams on the road. Just because it's kind of the Eastern Conference isn't great. It's not brilliant.
That's very British polite of you, Dan.
Let's see. They've got a win against LA when LA were crap. Win against Colorado. Everyone beats Colorado. And a win against Vancouver, who
Hope you don't eat those words in a week.
Yeah, knock on wood.
FC Dallas probably won't because FC Dallas has a terrible record there. But on the whole, everyone beats Colorado. They're actually the record against Western Conference teams on the road isn't fantastic.
They've only lost on the road 4 times this year. So look, a draw against against New York City in Frisco isn't a good result. Let's make that very, very clear. If you ever wanted to get into Dan Hunt's stupid 3 more points chant, this is the weekend to do it.
Oh, 100%. I know, like you mentioned, it was the almost joint best record with LAFC. I just kind of wanted to put that contrast to it, where LAFC's away record is against significantly more difficult teams. It will be definitely interesting to see. We know every home game has to be 3 points if FC Dallas wants to make the playoffs. Portland can do what they like to try and avoid getting to the playoffs, but you still have to make the home games count.
Right.
Yeah, let's be clear. The home advantage in MLS is strong. Dallas, since mid-May, is 6-0-3 at home. They have not lost a game at home in 9. So, even against a team as good as New York City FC, you should win your home games, particularly if you think you're a playoff team. So this is a game that Dallas will think we have to win, we're going to win, we should win. And that's the mentality you should have going into it. And if you don't win this game, then you don't deserve to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is from a position of what New York is facing, they do have the game on Sunday. So this is interesting, and I think it may portend what we or affect what we see from them on Sunday. So remember, they have a late afternoon game in Dallas this Sunday, and then their last 3 games are pretty sticky, guys. So they turn around and play at the postage stamp against Atlanta. Then they turn around the following Sunday and have to travel to Boston to play the Revolution. And then they finish the season fighting for the top spot in the Eastern Conference on the road at Philadelphia. So, we talk about coaches coming to a decision about maybe, thinking about how they want to use players. This may even be a bigger opportunity. We may not be surprised to find out that the Pigeons roll out a weakened side on Sunday afternoon, which would really help Dallas.
Boy, would it! I mean, that midweek game against Atlanta for them has got to be tough, and they won't want to take that lightly because that's conference opponent that they're likely going to run into in the playoffs down the line. So maybe they will rotate a little bit coming into Frisco. That'd be really nice. Really help us out.
Yeah, because you got to realize, so they've got a 5 point advantage right now on Philadelphia. They've got 6 points on Atlanta. New England, when they play New England in New England, that's a team that's fighting for that final space in the Eastern Conference. So they're certainly going to go balls out for that. Man, you just got to think that if New York feels like they could maybe take the foot off the pedal a little bit, give some people a rest, this is the game they're going to do it. So that said, that just all the more urgency for Dallas to get 3 points, especially if Dom decides he's going to throw out a weakened side as part of his long-term planning.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that ahead of time. Philadelphia and Atlanta are both going to want that number 2 seed, so that's a tough schedule for New York City down the stretch.
For sure. All right. The other big news this week was, I suppose it's big news, at least for the Hollingshead family. Ryan Hollingshead was signed to a new deal. I'm sure it's worth. We don't have any idea what the amount was, do we, Buzz?
I mean, we could look what his old number was. I imagine that he got a raise of some kind, but it probably isn't a substantial raise. I doubt that he would have elevated up above some of the guys ahead of him that are on like 400 or 500. You're talking about left back. It's not the same as the number 10 type thing. So he probably is somewhere between 200 to 300,000 if I had to guess.
Yeah, I get the sense that Ryan has gotten back to playing his better level of game, and that probably comes with the fact that Lucci's asked him to only play one position consistently now for the last several weeks. That helps a lot, a guy like Ryan.
Yeah, he's playing, statistically speaking, some of the best defensive, a two-way soccer in the league. I mean, he's the leading scorer of it for defenders. He's Dallas's second leading goal scorer. That's amazing. He's first in the league in like duels and aerials and recoveries. I mean, the guy's playing the best soccer of his life, and he just signed his money contract that he'll have, for the course of the prime of his career, 28, 29, 30. So, he's doing well for himself, and the team hopefully took care of him, and hopefully this is the first signing of what TD Andre has said, which is take care of the guys that have deserved it and earned it, and we're going to do that. So hopefully this is the first one. Hopefully that means that Pomykal for Reggie and Brian Reynolds are next, and whoever else is out of contract that they feel is really valuable, because there's 6 or 7 guys they got to get rid of, and there's 6 or 7 guys that got to get paid.
Hey, a couple of side notes from the game last night I meant to bring up when we were talking about the Seattle game. And Dan, maybe you got to see an up close of this in Chicago. I'm a bit disappointed in Michael Barrios' cover-up tattoo of his kissy lips. Do we know any story behind that? And what is the cover-up tattoo? Because it doesn't read very well on television. It just looks like it's like you got a bunch of black scribble over the kissy lips.
Maybe he was just a bit disappointed that Joseph Martinez's neck tattoo is a bit clearer.
Yeah. That was an interesting tattoo decision. And we can't go and finish the pod without discussing Luchi Gonzalez's sexy robe he was wearing last night.
The sweater, yeah.
You sure
that's the new butter leather.
Sure,
the new cardigan.
You sure that wasn't a waist-high romantic sexy time robe?
No, I'm not sure. Actually, I don't know. maybe they don't. Maybe when Lucci wanted an oversized sweater, that meant it was going to be too long for him because he's so short.
Yes, they were making lots of. They were crowing his fashion statement in the game that night. The club's social media was, and I was like, one, was it a cardigan sweater? Was it a robe? There's a little bit of debate. And two isn't that a little too close to the Pep Guardiola fashion line that you pick up at some European version of Target or something like that?
Yeah, I'm quite sure that is 100% in the Pep fashion line. We know how Lucci feels about Pep. I thought maybe he was fired up for the Mr. Rogers movie that's coming out in November, but You're right. It's probably more likely it's a Pep tribute.
It's probably a pep.
He's never going to speak to you again now.
Which one of us?
he, well, he doesn't speak to me very much. He took Buzz to lunch, if we'll remember. So maybe
Yeah.
that's off the table again.
Yeah, that's the last lunch I'm getting out of that guy.
Certainly, for sure. And then just a note, real quick, before we finish this up for the evening. There is a derby taking place this weekend. Yes, Buzzard?
Yeah, this weekend is the big Academy FC Dallas Solar SC weekend. There's a couple a year, a couple a season, but this is the first one. This one is the games are at Solar's place up in McKinney. So, if you like the Academy play, you're talking about Solar, who just won the U17 national title last year. So those guys will move to U19. And I'm sure that the guys that are now the FC Dallas 19s are going to feel like they were the better team last year. So, up and down the entire Academy, there's a little bit of rivalry there between FC Dallas and Solar these days. And so, if you like the Academy play, it's on Saturday, all those games at the Solar Complex up there in McKinney. And I'm going to go. I think it's going to be some pretty good soccer. It'll be fun.
Oh, I think it'll be outstanding. I'm sure they'll assign probably the best referee in the area for that game and referees. And that'll be some highfalutin, good quality academy level soccer, and not just for the Dallas area. That is about as good as you're going to find at that age group in the entire country, and that will be a hoot and good time. Do you know what time and what day it is?
Yeah, on Saturday, the 17s, as they are currently scheduled. Now, these things do change. It is Academy games, but the 17s are at 11 and the 19s are at 1. So those are the two biggest, most skilled games. And then several tiers down the Academy, they should also be playing if you're into the lower age brackets by chance if that's your thing. So, but those are the two big ones, and I know that for sure they're at 11 and 1 as of when I checked the schedule about 4 hours ago.
When you where is the schedule for those games? But is it on the FC Dallas website or something?
No, it's on the DA website. Like if you go to the DA website and look up the FC Dallas section, then it'll have the age groups, and then you click on any given age group and it'll list the whole roster. This is complicated, I know. And then down below the roster is the complete schedule for each club. It's all interfaced through the whole site, but that's where you'll see when they change the game time, which happened 2 weeks ago. They changed the game time from 1 to 9 in the morning, and I had to rearrange my day. But so far so good. Everything's on schedule, and those are two really good teams. And so I'm really relishing it. I love good academy play, and so it's going to be exciting.
But wait, there's more local derbies.
Oh.
Because this weekend there's the start of US Open Cup qualifying.
That's right.
And there's a bunch of Dallas teams in it this time.
Yeah, I think Lone Star Republic's playing the Football Factory. No, I think they're playing Footy Factory or whatever that club team is from Foro, that weird little soccer facility.
FC Fort Worth.
40SC.
Yeah, 40FC, which is that. Have you may never seen this, Buzz. There's this bizarre little soccer facility just south of the intersection of Preston and Beltline. It's all turf fields, and it sits along it's essentially floodplain along a White Rock Creek tributary, in between an office complex and an apartment building. And they've got all these little fake turf fields, and they've decided to put a team together that I think is playing in the UPSL or something like that. And I know
that's the team that Michelle coaches.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. So,
well, while you were talking, I looked at the schedule. NTX Rayados at 5 p.m. Plays Fort Worth. FC Fort Worth. That game's in Balch Springs, if that helps you at all.
Well, no. You know where that game is? That game is being played at the soccer facility owned by NTPSA, which is the kind of general men's amateur league. It's in Balch Springs off of Elam Road, and it is those fields are terrible.
Okay. Well, that's the Rayados Fort Worth, FC Fort Worth.
My point is, I find it hard to believe they play Open Cup games on that field. Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, it doesn't. I don't know who it must be. Rayados is the home team if they're playing in Dallas-ish
they are. They are.
Yeah. The other game is Lone Star Republic versus Innocentus, which is the big, by far the best UPSL team in the country. They're over in Fort Worth. They're really, really good and apparently run pretty quality. Yeah, they went to the semifinals, the national semifinals last year, was it? And Brandon made a deep run last year. They're actually a terrific team that plays at that level. They're significantly better than pretty much everybody else in the area in the UPSL. They're playing Lone Star Republic. That game's at Green Hill, which is where Lone Star Republic plays their games. The Green Hill School in Dallas, in Addison, technically. So that game's at 2 p.m. on Saturday. So those are your two local U.S. Open qualifiers this weekend.
Yeah, it makes me nuts that they're Open Cup games and one team's playing on the beautiful fields at Green Hill and one team's having to go shell it out at Balch Springs.
Yeah. Well, Rayados doesn't have their own home field, so they always struggle for places to play. That's a problem for them all the time.
Yeah, too bad. All right. Have we covered everything? Anything else? Dan, are you still alive over there? You've been very kind to cut in and out and save us from all your coughing and lung hacking.
Yeah, I'm surviving. Just I need to not get I need to not get the players sick. I need to not get Lucci sick. I need to not get the US Soccer Hall of Famers sick on Saturday. There's a lot of responsibility right now.
Wait, what's going on Saturday?
It's the US Soccer National Soccer Hall of Fame inductions.
Oh, is that this weekend?
Yes, This weekend. Abby Wambach and Sunil Gulati.
You can get Sunil sick. That's all right.
Yeah, that's fair.
I had totally forgotten that was this weekend.
Yeah, this is the Hall of Fame game against NYCFC.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right. Well, Buzz, anything else you want to bring up before we go?
I just have one tiny thing. Arturo Rodriguez, who should be MVP of USL 1, won the USL 1 goal of the week this week. Go look it up because that should be the goal of the year. It is an absolutely stunning free kick from an impossible angle. I mean, it's gorgeous. It should be goal of the year. That kid's a player, so good future for him. We'll see what happens.
If you haven't seen it, I'm sure Buzz will tweet it out 1,000 times on
already.
the Third Degree Twitter account. I would just urge you to go watch it because I'm telling you, if Messi or Eden Hazard or Marcus Rashford or any other top-notch player you play on FIFA did that exact same thing, it would have been on SportsCenter. And it had nothing to do with poor goalkeeping or a bad wall setup. It was just a bonkers world-class free kick. It was outstanding.
Yeah, it is superb quality, and that kid has got a future. We'll see if that future's with FC Dallas this winter. We'll find out.
And they did officially clinch their position. When did the playoffs for USL 1 start?
Oh, gosh. I think they have 2 more games, FC Dallas does, I think. The game here,
October 12th.
Yeah, this is the first game here, October 12th.
October 12th. And they don't know who they're playing yet, correct?
No, because there's 7 teams going for the final 2 spots in the playoffs. But they have North Texas SC did win clinch the inaugural regular season title, which is always nice. AKA their Supporters Shield. I don't think it has a name. So that's an achievement, and they have clinched home field through the whole playoffs, which makes them obviously as good as they are at home. That makes them by far the odds-on favorite to win the inaugural title of the whole thing in the playoffs too.
And that means they get promoted to the USL Championship next season, right?
No, not yet. USL has made some polite noises that maybe that'll happen someday, but I would not hold my breath for that. Well, what you get is promoted to FC Dallas is what you get if you're a good player from that team. Awesome. That's what you want anyway.
All right. Well, Dan, I hope you're feeling better. Buzz, don't go out and get sick. And don't forget the Dallas NYCFC game is Sunday, 5 p.m. at Frisco Stadium. It's a big one. You don't want to miss it. I know it's on the heels. Buzz, I saw your post on Twitter asking the poll of how many people are going to show up for this, considering the Cowboys, who are 2-0 and are playing the team that's already given up on the NFL season, and the Dolphins. That game's at noon. I have no idea how many actual butts and seats are going to show up for this game.
Well, I'll be working the Cowboy game myself, so I'll be rushing up to Frisco as soon as I can get out of there. So hopefully I'll make it in time.
All right. Well, go team, go. 5 o'clock at Toyota Stadium. NYCFC's in town. Go check out the Frisco kid. He's an actual thing. All right, FC Dallas fans, thank you for checking us out, and we will speak to you next week on another edition of Third Degree, the podcast.